Microtransactions, loot boxes, pay to win, these are terms we as gamers know and rightly despise. Where once a game might release in a finished, polished, and complete form, now on a AAA level they are more often than not a mere vehicle for further monetization. But major developers and publishers want to disguise this. Enter the corporate rebrand. Not loot boxes, surprise mechanics. Not pay to win, time saving. And the list will only expand of definable terms that just up and change in order to avoid the stigma and prejudice of utilizing the mechanics while quite literally utilizing the exact same systems. Well, the terms can change, the branding can shift, but the reality is that these mechanics indicate a larger underlying problem, not just a surface level annoyance. The notable Jim Sterling put it wonderfully. The inclusion of timesavers is an open acknowledgement that your game is bad. But today I want to take it one step further and assert that the expanding inclusion of timesaver systems indicates that games have sacrificed integral development principles and are at best foundationally flawed and at worst created with the express intent of not being enjoyable in certain areas so as to spur purchase of further boosts that will fix these intrinsic and intentional problems. I've addressed the topic of mandatory profit increase in plenty of videos before this, but the basic concept is that consecutive fiscal years come with heavily expected benchmarks of revenue increase in order to be considered successful. Understanding that principle, we can look at time savers for what they really are, which is a new tool to facilitate higher revenue. By itself, I don't think that is inherently bad. I'm not here to say that earning more money is itself something to despise, but how you earn it matters a great deal. Let's boil down the concept of time savers to its most basic premise here. The idea is you buy a game, a video game designed to be entertainment which on a foundational level is meant to consume time, and then you are incentivized to purchase additional material to skip the entertainment you just bought. That really is what's happening. One might argue that the time savers are there for people that don't have enough time to play the game and stay competitive or on an equal footing with their friends, so this lets them do that at a faster rate, and whether or not there is some fragment of value to that argument is for another time, but the basic progression is buy game, pay more money to skip the game you just paid for, which is meant to consume your time and be fun. This is already absurd, but it goes much deeper. The largest culprit right now when it comes to this type of behavior has to be Ubisoft. Assassin's Creed, Ghost Recon, these are examples of titles that sell pretty much everything available in-game as extra transactions, even down to skill points and money. For Ghost Recon, they were retracted immediately after launch with a half-hearted apology of they weren't supposed to be there yet, which makes no sense because that is not a glitch or an error. That is a fully functional store section, which either means that they are totally and completely incompetent or lying, and those aren't great options. But anyways, Ghost Recon and Assassin's Creed are both historically single-player narrative-driven titles, and there is a multiplayer component to Ghost Recon now in the controversial inclusion of loot and other new systems, but at a basic level, these are two games traditionally meant for a player to buy and then enjoy themselves. The long-standing norm in game development was to craft a title that was thoroughly engaging from top to bottom. Before the concept of digital downloads or online patching, a game would need to be in a much more polished condition before launch day. I'm not saying they were perfect, plenty of them were still riddled with bugs and glitches or whatever else, but the safety net of day one patching just didn't exist. There was a more rigid deadline, and they had to be playable before disc manufacturing, whereas now they can just make a game online only, manufacture the discs while the game is a broken piece of garbage, and fix it incrementally later on. With this complete product approach, the game needed to be engaging from start to finish. If there was a giant hole in the gameplay or a lengthy session of tedious grinding, players would potentially drop the title outright and tell their friends not to buy it. Games were made to grip your interest, consume your time, and they would genuinely compete against one another for the limited number of purchases that first and second wave gamers were willing to pay for during the busy release season. This is now changing. An early example that comes to mind is Shadow of War and the Shadow Wars section of the campaign. For those that don't know or never played that game, it was fantastic. I enjoyed it. A high quality title that I can almost fully recommend from start to finish, but there is one pesky segment where this veil is lifted and we can see the methodology at play. The Shadow Wars was a lengthy segment of fortress assaults right at the end of the game, which locked away the final cutscene behind, I don't really remember, but I think it was upwards of 20 or 30 hours of grinding. This was a segment purely designed to force users into the shop. There have since been changes, at least that's what I'm told, and I haven't played the game in quite some time, but the initial system was built in such a way as to be fun most of the time, to have comfortable progression most of the time, but for a chunk of the game it was intentionally made badly so as to spur users to pay for a way to skip it. That is, pay for a way to nullify a section of the very same game they had paid to play in the first place. Moving on to a title like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, though to be fair it is actually somewhat disputed, I and many other players that I discussed the game with came to the conclusion that the game had been altered so as to feel most comfortable when purchasing the permanent 50% XP boost. This means, if we accept these anecdotal findings as fully or even partially true, that the base experience of buying the game with no added transactions was intentionally designed to be less appealing than that of the experience boosted format. It's a slightly more shrouded method, but the basic effect is similar in that development principles have shifted from the creation of a complete, self-sufficient, and quality experience to crafting an intentionally flawed piece of work and selling the fixes to the player base. Picture this effect in any other industry and it becomes absolutely absurd. Imagine buying a bed and the headboard is broken on purpose, so you have to go buy glue from the same store to fix the headboard they designed to be broken. Imagine buying your car and the radio is broken on purpose, so you have to go buy a new one from the manufacturer, even though you just bought the car brand new. In any other industry, this behavior is ludicrous, but in gaming, it is becoming normal. As the desire shifts from crafting a worthy individual product to crafting a gauntlet of broken or tedious mechanics designed to require further purchases, the relative quality of games has nowhere to go but down. This is not to say that all games are built this way, far from it in fact, but enough of them are on a AAA level to justify the criticism of the overall trend. As has been well established in this industry, things do not occur in a vacuum. Where one practice is proven lucrative, others emerge, and there is widespread adoption of concepts by rivals and competitors once there is sufficient enough data to justify their existence. These mechanics will spread. The philosophy of manufacturing an intentionally faulty product and selling the fixes will spread. And when it does, there needs to be a horde of voices ready to offset the passive or defending players who will justify the idea by saying that timesavers are beneficial. The most common deflection that I hear is that if you don't like it, don't buy it. But that does not fully apply here, because even if you do not like these time saver purchases, better known as pay to win, and you do not buy any of them at all, you are still participating in an augmented experience that has been crafted so as to hinder your enjoyment and nudge you towards them. The mere existence of these items does not hurt the overall product on a fundamental level, and therein lies the straw man that many defenders will construct. The damage comes from the effect that is forced upon every single buyer, even those who never purchased a microtransaction in their life, when they are subjected to the new design philosophy and broken progression. If the time savers existed in a totally isolated environment, fully and completely separate from the game itself, with no corresponding changes to motivate you to purchase them, I would have much less of a problem. I would still hold a stance of complete bewilderment, because the concept of paying to skip the thing you paid to spend time playing remains true, but I would be much less vocal about their widespread damaging effect. But they are not fully separate, because if they were, the number of purchases would be substantially lower. There are even educational seminars on this, the carefully crafted procedure for hunting whales, where it's all about when to introduce the time savers, how you break the first barrier and then turn a player into a repeat spender, and these are all keywords that they actually use. It's becoming not just a design philosophy, but a full-on scientific procedure on how to psychologically manipulate the players by transforming the game world around them into a funnel that sends them right to the shop. This is where the true outrage comes from. It's not a belief that players who have less time shouldn't be able to enjoy a game. It's a disdain for the idea that such systems also come with the added effect of polluting the game itself, as the experience is twisted around incentivizing purchase. My argument is not that you only have 2 hours a week to play, so I flat out think you don't deserve to enjoy a game. That couldn't be further from the truth. My argument is that when your possible enjoyment, because in truth many players with limited time also do not purchase these items at all, when your possible enjoyment comes at the detriment of every single person who purchases the game unless they pay additional sums, that is when I have an irreconcilable issue. The term I use to describe this process is throttling, and I've discussed it before in past videos because it's a rather important concept, but as with almost every other troubling concept in the games industry, it appears to be getting worse with time rather than pulling back. That's it though. The point is that when a publisher calls these additional items time savers, it is really just an attempted rebrand of the words pay to win because they don't like the optics. Don't let them do that, especially not when the added effect is negatively impacting the experience for literally everyone so that these transactions become more profitable. If you want to support, there are links down below: anti-politically correct merch, Twitter, which is a horrid social media platform, but for some reason it means a lot in this industry, and then Patreon. But if we're being 100% upfront, I spend that money on food and beer, so it's not just optional, it's like extra optional. But I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.